both artists that really, are not confined by the mediums in which they choose to create their work. But they are defined by an incredible history, deep friendship, and a strong connection, obviously, to the city of New York, where they have been part of an incredible explosion of creativity amongst a group of peers who have gone through highs and lows and have some of those who have survived, these two being great examples of the two real stars of the new generation of New York artists that have gone on to get international recognition. So for us here in Istanbul, that it's an incredible privilege to welcome Dan and Ryan. The format of this is going to be a real informal conversation between these two, exploring their history, and we've got a kind of mashup of images here of both of their work that is going to loop through the conversation to create the context for the discussion that we're having. So Dan and Ryan, I want to hand over to you guys to maybe Ryan would like to go first. How would you like to introduce this conversation between you?
Hello. Hey.
Good. Hello.
For people who might be a little bit unfamiliar with your work, maybe a fun way to start is to talk through some of these images as a little warm up.
Well,
so,
I think just a starting point for Dan and I is that we've known each other for more than half of our lives. I met Dan when I was 15 years old, and we grew up skateboarding in New Jersey and New York City.
Jersey.
Yeah, got some Jersey camaraderie here. Kirsten Dunst and Dan Colen and myself representing.
what age were you then?
I was 14, maybe like 13 even, 13, 14, he was 15.
Yeah, it was. We met originally in New York skating. We used to skateboard under the Brooklyn Bridge. There was this really great skate spot called the Brooklyn Banks, and we would both go there after school, take the train in, and skate there, and then usually go up to Midtown and skate by the Time Life building, and then end up at Astor Place in the evening, and then kind of make it home before our parents got too mad that we were gone every day. And then eventually I got a car and chauffeured his ass around for many years.
I mean, it's pretty amazing also just even thinking about, you talking about like the scene that's developed, how many people that we're still close with now that really inform our work and are kind of around our work. We knew from then even, like Leo Fitzpatrick and Aaron, and it's pretty, it's just a long time, and there is a lot of history,
But in context, at that time when you were skateboarders, was that the time of Kids, Larry Clark, or does it predate that a bit?
Oh, we met before that.
Yeah, it predates that.
But it's that kind of scene that's represented in the film is kind of what New York was like at that time with the skate kids and.
Yeah, definitely. I think we had a different experience because we were from the suburbs, It was like the city was this place that we went, but at the end of the day, we were going back to, like suburban houses and trees and just, making that journey. It was quite a different life. And we were both into art, right when we met. We were both taking life drawing classes, and I remember there was this one point where we used to skateboard by this pool hall, and I was in the parking lot, and I told Dan, I said, I'm applying to this school, and here's my portfolio, and he looked at it, and we were like in this parking lot. I pulled it out of the trunk of my car.
You had a painting of a man in a business suit with a computer head. So like it was shoulders of a person, and then his head was a computer, and it was like digitized inside of it. And I was like pretty impressed.
It was about technology. So we always, and it was,
Encouraged each other a lot.
yeah, right after that I moved, Dan's younger than me, so I moved to New York, and my first apartment was on Bleecker Street, and Dan would come and stay there, and then soon after that he started studying at Rhode Island School of Design, and he would come down to New York every weekend, and that's kind of when we started forming a group. It was right when I met the artist Dash Snow, and he had a graffiti crew, and we all started hanging out together, and I moved to the East Village, and I had this apartment on 7th Street, and it was just a real flop house, you know, like, there was so many people coming in and out, and sleeping over, and
Describe the energy of that, of the Lower East Side apartment, and what kind of things happened there.
Just like, maybe just a side note to like introduce that, like what I always kind of found pretty interesting was like how these different subcultures, you know, just, which is really like at the end of the day, like, you know, subcultures even, it's just like kids on the street, you know, like that's what we were just like, we all wanted to do something, you know, some of us knew what it was, other of us didn't know what it was, you know, but it was just like a general like ambition, you know, for like, I don't know, just like to kind of claim our own kind of, you know, just like be able to project our voice, you know, and but how he's like skateboarding, graffiti, or just, you know, vandalism, you know, like causing trouble in general.
It was also
like
the beginning of a lot of gentrification in New York, and you were kind of reclaiming a little bit more chaos, I think. Would that be there was a lot of kind of new architecture going into the city, a lot of gentrification with Rudy Giuliani, things were cleaning up, and
yeah, we were trying. I mean, there was a.
I don't think we were really aware of that because we were so high all the time. Honestly, like, you know, it's just like.
Let's talk about drugs.
Well, I mean, what I was getting at was really like how just like, you know, being bad, you know, basically was like almost this like kind of cocoon for like our, you know, like eventual like more like intentional art making, you know, and like we got to develop together without really engaging anything serious. You know, we didn't have like missions, or like I was saying, it was vaguer, you know, and it was just more about like us and like, and
but you
like,
realize that in hindsight, more at the time, this was a kind of these were your formative years. I mean, but it became a hothouse of creativity. Is that what you were saying?
yeah, but without even having to, like, I mean, there was a point where we started engaging that we were artists, you know, and we would talk to each other about it and develop through those conversations. But like, you know, with him talking about him showing me the portfolio, it was like we kind of knew we did that, but like I was like, wow, we both really do this, but we could just skateboard together every day, you know, and just thinking about 15, 17 years later, and all these people that I know from back then, we all do the same thing. We didn't like talk about it then, but like these subcultures are just like these great places for, you know, just like these disaffected youth to kind of congregate, and it's amazing like how the minds are similar without really engaging in that kind of information yet, you know. Just like we just wanted to like break windows and get high, and but like, you know, that's what we thought, you know, like, but we were actually just trying to get at something, you know, which is like, you know, making imagery and you know.
So the
sharing
moment that you were showing the portfolio, was there another moment like that where you sort of realized that it was more than just getting high and breaking imagery, but that could translate, that kind of action could translate to creating work?
Yeah,
Well, it was that, you know, that energy that that creates, you know, by running around the city, you know, in subway tunnels, on top of rooftops, you know, in bathrooms, and just, you know, all that energy, I think, goes into making the art, you know, and we were very serious about making art. I don't think there was ever a point that, you know, we didn't think that we were ever artists. I mean, you know, from when I was born, I knew that I was going to be an artist, you know, and the first 18 years of my life, I studied painting, you know, and then from that went to poetry, and then finally went to graphic design, and then through graphic design found photography, and you know, it's I think just all of those things kind of, you know, mashed together sort of make the aesthetic that I guess would be my art. And, you know, for Dan, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it gets fully literalized, you know, and you can kind of see it in the pictures. I do think there were like different moments of epiphanies, you know, similar to that developed slowly. Ryan and I would like maybe later in college college, I would be coming to visit him, and we'd start like engaging in that kind of conversation about art. I have like really specific memories of sitting next to Dash on a couch and being like, it's art, and being like, it's art, like, like yeah, okay, like maybe it's art, like it's not just, like, it's not just like like what I do, like to pass the time. It's a thing, like, and it's part of history. Like look at this other thing somebody made that they called art. It's pretty similar, or it's something that like makes sense coming after that. I remember things like that. So with him it was pretty interesting because like he just with Dash there was like he wasn't like as specifically tuned into like that's what he wanted to do, and it was like vaguer and it was a slower development, but or actually it was a quicker development. It just started maybe later in life, and so like those like epiphany moments were really obvious, and it was just like looking at a Richard Prince book and being like, wait, what? He just like took it and like it was a Marlboro ad and it was like yeah, like but he's just calling it art,
Yeah.
the shit. And I mean,
Appropriation art was that at its height in New York. It was sort of beginning to become very much a part of the art world zeitgeist. But what you guys were doing was really defined outside of the art world. It was defined from the street art, and it was defining itself at that time. So that's what you're saying.
Well, I think we were really interested in the street. I mean, like I said, skateboarding is such a big part of, I think, what we both did. Like my approach to photography and kind of Dan's approach to painting. It's just like growing up, being a skater. I think I started skateboarding around 7 years old, and all you do is it's just observing people, and you're finding these places that are meant for something else, and turning them into these skate spots. So it's a creative process to do that, and then you're in so many different places. You're downtown, you're uptown, and you're looking at light and you're looking at architecture, and it's just this activity that forces you to be outside and just like look at the world. And I think taking all of those elements and being exposed to them from such a young age, really, you're putting all that back into your art. And so I don't think that necessarily I would consider myself a street artist. I just think that I've just been sitting on a lot of sidewalks for a long time.
Brilliant.
I think another thing maybe you were trying to get at before was like, and I do think it's really relevant to Ryan's work, but with always early on trying to, there was like just such a destruction. It was just such like that. It was just so there. It was such just such a part of our lifestyle, like destroying ourselves, destroying what's around us, and like it was always hard for me to tune into like what that was, but I always tried to, like society, this, that, whatever at the time, parents, teachers, like, but to get to see as like the work develops, creation through destruction, and just that kind of thing, and that's become really important to my work. Like in here, there's like a flagpole that you'll see, and maybe there's like a backboard, and I make things, that look like destroyed things, or I destroy things and say now they're done, now that it's been made, and like that is like kind of become
pieces here.
right, yeah, and that's really like about a similar kind of thing, taking the street, and just like kind of, I mean, it's weird to use the word appropriating because like what I think me and my friends do is, it's informed by that, but it's such a different thing, but yeah, really, it's just like taking what we're surrounded by. With skateboarding, it was the same thing. It was, like we'd make something out of the destruction. It was nothing to us. Then through like destroying kind of like this different whatever landmark, and they often were landmarks, and I think we think about a lot of these, you skate on these landmarks, and you get to rip them to shreds. And it's a part of that whole mentality.
More about your peers and how that group grow, and who some of the other friends of yours of the same age, how you influenced each other. There was Dash, obviously you mentioned. There was Leo Fitzpatrick, but
Yeah, Leo and I knew each other from New Jersey. We both worked at different skateboard shops, and then I moved to New York, and I met Dash, and he was part of a graffiti crew called Iraq, and what Iraq meant was racking is stealing. So when you write graffiti, you steal all your spray paint, and basically everything that goes into it is stolen. That's kind of like part of the subculture. so their group was called Iraq, and it was also because Dash was really, one of his main obsessions was Saddam Hussein, and he had a lot of tattoos of Saddam Hussein on his body, and he was just fascinated by him, and so I think that's, you know, part of another reason why they called their graffiti crew Iraq. And then from there, like Nate Lohman definitely was part of our group. It still is part of our group. And
I mean, Nate and that, you know, you're collaborating with Nate. You've done a lot of collaborations, and you've got a big one coming up in Rome that you're working on now at Gagosian Gallery. Tell me how Nate came into your lives, because I think.
Well, it was, you know, like, it was always really everything. Everything kind of came from just like a youth street culture, you know, really like, even with, it's curious because like, you know, as we got a little older and kind of engaged in like, you know, like, it's confusing because we always were really specifically, like, our art was the most important, right? Like, we engaged it really seriously daily, every day, all
Yeah.
day, you know, like, we worked really
You were
hard.
disciplined.
And we
as
were
artists,
disciplined,
yeah.
like even at like a young age, you know, we were. So it's, I don't want to like confuse by saying like it was always like, you know, a mess. But we didn't like conversationally, we just didn't like get back together at the pub and like sit around and talk about art. You know, it just like wasn't that, you know.
You weren't
wasn't, like,
intellectualizing
academic.
it, you were living
Yeah,
it. You
exactly.
weren't intellectualizing it. Yeah.
Thank you. And so, but you know, as you know, kind of time went on, we did engage in it a little more. You know, and you know, just because it was just like a natural development. And you know, Dash and Ryan were people that really like, you know, met on the street, and that's how we became friends. And it was you know, seemed coincidental almost that we developed in like a similar direction. But then
well, Dan and I were, you know, we lived together for 10 years. So when I was living at Bleecker Street, he would stay at my apartment, and then we got an apartment together on 7th Street, and that's when we started kind of, I guess, you know, we were still, we were both out of college by then, and Dan had a studio in Coney Island, and it was really far out, and it was in an antique store, so you had to go through the antique store to get to his studio in the back.
And what
it
kind
was,
of work were you both making at that point? Can you remember?
I started out making documentary photographs. That's how I got into it. I never studied photography. I went through so many different changes throughout art. I always thought I was going to be a painter. And so I just started shooting what was going on in my life, and, you know, like, kind of my friends. And it was initially, like, the first 2 years was very fly-on-the-wall style, just, you know, in the subway tunnels and on roofs and just, you know, all around. Basically what you do when you first start making photographs, you know, like the people that are available to you and your surroundings and what's going on in your life, you know, it was definitely, I felt, I could say now that I was contributing to the history of downtown, you know,
Yeah.
within those years, and that lineage. And then I just had a moment where I didn't want to do that anymore. You know, I really wanted to start directing people, and I think I was really fortunate early on, you know, to get a lot of support from a lot of good people that helped me out. And I got this show at the Whitney Museum, and it was kind of amazing. It was a solo show, and I showed all the work that I had shot probably over the last, I would say, it was just only about 2 years of work. And after that show happened, I was so exposed that I really couldn't do the thing that I was doing before that, you know, because everyone knew who I was, and it became something different.
Anymore.
Yeah, you know, it was like, you know, it wasn't just about making photographs to make zines to give my friends. It was about making photographs to put on walls in galleries and museums, and
let me actually backtrack and just a quick over here, just because we like even getting to Nate, but like, you know, we all really helped each other a lot constantly, whether like it was like, you know, intentionally or not. You know, Ryan really introduced me to so many people, and later, because you know, our work, all of our friends' work was so different, we'd have different people who were interested, and like, you know, there was a lot of support that we could introduce other ones to, and our world became bigger because of that, and really like, yeah, network, I guess you call it, that.
No, I meant it became a network through those connections.
Yeah.
I didn't mean that you were networking.
Right,
I
no,
meant
but
the
it
network
was.
developed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my babies, we're gonna all regret a couple words we said today, but
Was there any figures that were already established? Because it sounds like you were all very young, you were all emerging at the same time, you were informing each other's work, taking it into different directions. But were there any figures in the New York scene that were older and had were more people maybe like Terry Richardson or other people that came in and saw you guys and helped further that? I mean, how did the Whitney show happen? Because that's a major turning
Whitney show
point for
happened
you.
because I basically, yes, there's one person, and it's this guy, his name is Jack Walls, and he's kind of like our surrogate father, and he is sort of like a downtown legend, and he's a poet, and we met him just, there used to be this bar that we would hang out at called Cherry Tavern, and he was kind of like, almost like our Yoda or something like that, you know. He would give us like this really like amazing kind of like spiritual advice, and you know, like he was very knowledgeable about art and about just every aspect of life. And I think that especially for myself and Dan and Dash, he's somebody who we have so much love for, and who really like took care of us, and you know, kind of told us like yes or no, or like don't do that, or you know, you're stupid, or you know, just kind of something like that, you know, it's like, you know, how basically parents really don't understand, most parents don't understand what you do.
Yeah.
So, you know, he was kind of like this parental figure that really kind of got it, and he had been around New York City for, you know, many decades, and he just, you know, he blessed us with his knowledge.
it really was like an inside kind of job also, you know, like it was, we had Jack, but like, you know, Harmony Corinne is a good friend of mine, and like talking to him now, it's pretty curious because I kind of feel fortunate, you know, he's a little older than us, and so he had Christopher Wall, Richard Prince, Katie Nolan, he had all these people that like he was connected to, you know, who were like, you know, informed
Established figures,
established and informed his development. And just something about how generations, you know, stop and break up, and kind of new waves begin. We were just like, they were just too old at that point, right? And there was like somebody like John Kern or somebody like that. They didn't really have a group, or like Cecily, like it didn't interest us. That's what it was. It was like that next generation had like such a different spirit, which was a byproduct of like the time. And you know, I think saying it now, it got talked about a little more back then. But like Damien Loeb and Cecily Brown, and such a different spirit. And we were so against that, and they were, you know, we eventually like knew them, but it was just like it wasn't something we were trying to, you know, learn from or pull that kind of energy from. And it was almost, you know, it's almost like art's made better in resistance. And so we were trying to like break out of some weird like kind of nice thing that was happening.
Yeah, I think that
I mean, geographically,
I don't think there definitely wasn't, you know, many figures for us. I mean, talking about, I think that, you know, I was really making, you know, I was very interested in kind of like desktop publishing, and I started to like make these books, and it was all pictures of, you know, so many of my friends, and I remember I sent one to Index Magazine, and the publisher of Index Magazine called me, and he said, you know, I really love this book, and I'd like to publish it, and you know, will you let me do that? I said, yeah, of course. And then that was the first book that I ever did, and it was available wherever that magazine was available, and from there it was just like kind of this whirlwind that happened. You know, it was like I had a show in, I think within a year I had a show in Paris, Berlin, Milan, and then
Ryan, you blew up quick.
yeah, it was
You went like that. After a lot of development, then it happened quite quickly for you. But I want to go back to being in New York. You did a lot of trips outside of New York. So tell us about excursions out in the city.
Well, the first trip that I did was actually to go and see Dan.
Before his Whitney show, I remember I was going like more and more isolated, and I was always jealous of how he worked with all these people in the city. And I even at that Brooklyn studio, I felt like I needed to be more isolated to ever be able to finish the work.
Right.
And I went out upstate for a summer, and I remember actually sitting in the woods talking on the phone and him telling me he got the Whitney show, and I was like in the middle of nowhere by myself, like seemed like the most unreal thing. Like,
Right.
like no way. But yeah, then they came up and visited me. And I think like I was saying before, you know, I eventually developed a kind of big community around that helps me make my art. You know, there's a lot of people involved, and at the time, you know, I was very isolated, but I was in the country, and I think like seeing how he worked with all these people, it really informed that like direction that my work took. I just understood that for like my mental stability, I needed like to not only be by myself. And I think him coming upstate to visit me was a pretty big turning point, and just even seeing the we just didn't leave the city ever,
Yeah.
you know. So
You were
him coming up
urbanites
there.
in a way.
Well, it was, you know, it was when you moved to New York, I think, or I think any city, you know, when you're younger, you don't want to leave. It's just, there's, you know, it's so amazing and there's something to do every single night and you're meeting so many new people. And I think that lasts about, you know, 5 years. And then after that, you're like, wow, it's actually really amazing to leave, to get out, you know, for a little bit and take a breather. And Dan, you know,
Did you do a road trip together, you two?
well, basically, like my first kind of venture outside of making photographs in New York was to go and visit Dan in upstate New York, and he was painting in this barn, and we got this band together, about 15 people, and I brought them up, and that was like, it was
But
really
cool when he was
eye-opening.
only shooting all friends of ours. Like so, it was
Yeah.
all friends of ours. It wasn't models.
Yeah, it was, it really opened my eyes to like, you know, getting people out of the city, and it informed my
that's that body of work,
trips.
that's that body of work where the girl is naked in the tree going like that.
No, that's not. That's it's just.
like
it's
predated
sort
that.
of-
We just all got naked.
That
and
was
ran
just
around.
like the-
He saw the potential.
there
of
was
that.
All
Yeah.
got naked, ran around,
I mean-
and took some of the most amazingly optimistic pictures that were being produced by anyone
That was
in
the
that
first, that was-
generation. This complete sense of freedom, of optimism, of possibilities. It was a real dream world that you created in those imageries that no one else was tapping into in a culture that was much more nihilistic at that time. So, yeah,
It was really important to me
groundbreaking.
to go to do that trip, and it really opened my eyes to the possibility of, you know, what I could do with my photography and where it could go. Because I was really at a point.
So you were,
where
that was the
I was
first point
ner-
you were developing your language that would later become.
Yeah, well, up until that point, I was just making photographs in New York, and then, you know, traveling up there, I was like, wait, you know what? I can, you know, I grew up in the woods. I grew up playing in the woods, and I grew up in nature, and I had all these adventures with my brothers and sisters, and, you know, and I thought, okay, like, you know, this is good. It was very organic, and it just, I decided then that, you know, I wanted to start traveling, and the summer following that, I had this really great patron that had this chateau in Vermont, and he just said, you know, come up to my place, and you know, whatever you need, I'll take care of, and it's all the photos that you make there, just you know, will go into my collection. And that was the summer of 2003, and then the summer of 2004, I started to write a screenplay because I wanted to make a movie, and I was spending all this time and doing all this research and figuring out kind of what I was gonna, you know, what I was gonna do, and I was really interested in making a movie about being on the road, you know, and I was just like sort of Easy Rider, 2-Lane Blacktop, or, you know, Jack Kerouac, or, you know, just all these things that I was so kind of, you know, I loved, and then I just realized it wasn't my time to do that, so I took all that information, and I didn't have any money at the time, and someone who collected my work was Agnes B, so I called her up and I said, hey, listen, you know, like, I need, like, you know, some cash, like, can you here's my proposal, and, you know, will you give me the money to do this cross-country trip? And that was the summer of 2005, and she wired it into my bank account, and it was really amazing, you know, she was really...
She's an incredible art angel, somebody who, you know, is very rare, but who has supported people like Harmony, very taking a risk on very young artists.
Absolutely, especially, you know, Jean-Michel Basquiat and all the early graffiti writers, and Keith Haring and Harmony, and, you know, she's a really wonderful woman. And that's when I started doing these cross-country journeys, and it's just something that's such an integral part of my work. And
That was also something amazing that we all learned from Ryan, because like you're saying, he really skyrocketed, you know, like really so, and he was always, you know, like a bit a bit ahead of us. So it was really great to get to watch him and learn from him. And, you know, he was always so generous with everything, you know. But, you know, seeing him, you know, get that money, basically, you know, it was like mind blowing. And it was just that simple, you know, and like it was important to develop. Like it's like your ideas grow, like so how are you gonna pull them off? And watching him do that was like, you know, really educational. And like the what you know, I would ask him, like, so what do I do? And he'd just be like, just tell him what you need, you know, like tell him you need 10 grand. That's it. Like, and if he wants it, then you know, like and then I just started doing it, you know. Then I picked up the phone. It gave me confidence and like the simplicity of it, you know. So, and that really enabled me to kind of grow to the next level. And it was right after that, you know, like when I called Javier, and that's
So
what I did.
that Javier Perez was your first gallery?
Well, no, I had a gallery, but it was like when my ambition, my scale grew, and I was like, my gallery just didn't have the money. He just suggested
what was
that.
the first? Because you know, Ryan had the Whitney show. What was your first kind of breakthrough show?
Well, I was working with the Rivington Orange girls, Maribel and Melissa, and it was like this thing that was kind of happening then.
It was actually the Whitney Biennial.
The Whitney Biennial was probably like a moment where things started kind of changing.
It was
2006, and right after that is when I did the bathroom show at Bogosian, which is just like another funny coincidence. I wasn't working with them then. It was like a proposal I put in, and I knew somebody young there who Larry was just like, yeah, well, I don't care, you know, like. But it was still like it was around that, and it all kind of things started shifting.
Well, you have to. I mean, the bathroom show is actually really funny because in Larry Gagosian's space on 26th Street, 24th Street, he has how many bathrooms?
5 bathrooms.
He has 5 bathrooms there. Like, who needs 5
And it was
bathrooms?
it was even around the whole thing. It was like you know, another late night situation, you know, and it was just another crazy ambitious kid who wasn't an artist, was working at a gallery, and we were actually at Cecily's place, and he was like, no, you know, we're gonna get you a show at the Gagosian Gallery, and I was just like laughing, you know, like, are you kidding me? And he was like, no, we're gonna do it, you know, and I was like not even interested, like I have no interest in you know, like being in that context. I'm 25 years old, and just jokingly, I was like, I'll do a show in the bathrooms at Gagosian, and you know, he's like, well, there's 5 of them. I was like, I'll make 5 paintings, you know. And then he called me back like a week later and was like, no, it's on. And I was like, no, I was just kidding. And so I went, you know, it would take me like a year to work on a painting or half a year to work on a sculpture. I was like, I can't. So I went I went around the secondhand stores because, like Ryan was saying, there was an antique shop in front of my studio, and I would sometimes just like paint on the paintings there. And I just got 5 paintings, and I did some stuff to some of them, and I didn't do anything to others, and I just hung them on the wall. And it kind of completed the whole gesture of doing a show at Gagosian, you know, like not with my paintings, you know, like not with my gallery, not in the gallery, you know, in the bathrooms. And it was just,
Was it 2 fingers up, or was it more of a nod and a wink? I mean, how did you describe the emotion of that?
I think it was supposed to be all of it, and you know, I think about that. Like, I'm not sure how to define it, but you know, most of my work, and I think a lot of my peers' work, you know, the way we deal with irony is so different than the '90s artists we were talking about, like Richard Prince and Christopher Wool, and like we don't like our work isn't. It's often ironic, but it's not about irony, right? Like, and I think theirs often is. I think they're using it as like a, you know, theirs is about that. And ours, it's just like part of like the emotional range of it, you know. You bump into irony because like you do in life, you know, like and it kind of fucks you, and you can kind of play with it, and it's kind of funny, and it's kind of depressing sometimes. But so I think, you know, that show was like that.
About how the media, then, you know, because you became famous, how that affected the scene and how your work changed because of that. But firstly, personally, you're both very into tattoos, so I want you to both tell us about an important tattoo that you've got each.
Dan's got a really good one on his arm. That's my favorite one of his. Where is it?
That's Pepe Le Pew.
It says everything and nothing. And
I gave this to myself one night in a hotel room, actually, in London. And,
You did it yourself?
Yeah, I was like waiting for an airplane, and I was like, I can't fall asleep, like, And airplane 3 hours, how am I gonna keep myself awake? And it's like, you know, we were full of good ideas like that then. So,
There's something so poetic about it.
but this, you know, this has a
really
lot to
unusual
do.
typefaces used here and some symbols as well. There's a heart in the middle.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with, I think about this, and like, you know, it's even relevant to that, just like with my work and the equality of things, and, you know, like the confusion of things, and, you know, what's better or worse, and, I don't know, when you were talking about even optimism with Ryan's work, that was like, you know, I think that me and my friends were really getting less and less optimistic at a point when he decided to kind of change his direction. You know, I think this tattoo has a lot to do with that, but that was really inspiring, you know, and like, I was seeing so many less, like, my options were getting smaller and smaller, you know, I thought my work was progressing, but like that, I just didn't have that open
But were you
outlook.
personally going, I mean, you personally dealt with a lot of addiction and issues like
Yeah,
that. So
you know, yeah, I did, but like, you know, and it's relevant, and it's also not. But he, you know, and I think at the time he was kind of overcoming a lot of that stuff also, and really that was pretty inspiring to just see like, you know, he was optimistic, he was interested in the future and like a bigger picture, you know. It wasn't even occurring to me then, you know. And you know, yeah, all the addictions and all the like, just my lifestyle is just, you know, it only has like, you know, it has a short life. Right, so.
tattoo.
Oh, tattoo. Well, my tattoo isn't as kind of beautiful and poetic as Dan's, but well, on my trips, we all every journey that I make, which are usually long. They usually last between like 2 and 4 months, where we'll shoot every single day, and to kind of commemorate them, we give each other stick and poke tattoos. It's sort of like a tradition. So the first trip that I did, they said, you know, you have to get a tattoo. And I said, I don't want a tattoo. You know, I don't have any tattoos. And they said, no, you have to get one. So I kind of thought about it, and then I remembered that Nick Knight book, Skinhead. And there's this really great tattoo of the skinhead on his lip, and I think he has the word skins written in it. And then I thought, yeah, that'd be cool. I can get this like secret tattoo. So they said, well, what do you want to get tattooed in your mouth? And then I said, well, you know, I always want a big penis in my mouth. So I got the word penis written. Gigantic in my mouth, so you know, it's just even when I'm dead, I'll always have, you know, a penis in my mouth.
See, that's poetic, right?
If this ends up on the internet, I'm sorry, Mom.
Going back to what Dan said, you know, you've been living together for 10 years, you've been friends since you were 14, but your trajectories were kind of going in, or maybe emotionally you were going in different directions. You were becoming more self-destructive and nihilistic, and you were becoming more internationally recognized and opening your horizons. How did that affect your personal relationship?
Oh man, we're like brothers. You know, like I don't think there's anything that could ever happen that can affect our relationship. Like, you know, I love him more than anybody that I've ever loved in my life. You know, it's like his, you know, our families are so close, and you know, I have such a good relationship with his parents, and he has such a good relationship with, you know, my parents and my family as well. And I think that you know, we're not competitive.
You know, but there was like, you know, he took care of me for years. You know, like I wasn't like, you know, I consider myself an adult now, but I haven't been with for that long, and he was like still wiping my ass, you know, 2 years ago or something like that. You know, he was there for me, and it changed our relationship. But he definitely, like, his support was something that, you know, was like always was, but like through my stunted development was really important.
So the scene, you know, Dash, you guys, Nate, etc., became famous. There was a lot of media attention, international attention around your lifestyles as well, the drugs, the excesses, and you represented something that was a movement. How did that start affecting your work?
Were you conscious of it, or was it something that you were?
No, I
you
think that's
managed
something
to-
that the media created. I think that we were, we just all hung out together, just like any kind of group of artists does. And then sort of the media takes that and they, kind of put you in a box and they make you they put a name on you. And
So I remember the YBAs in England, where Days to Confuse and another magazine that had come from. We had this, which was a generation before you: Damien Hirst, Sam Taylor Wood, Angus Verse, Sophie, Sarah Lucas, etc. They really embraced the media. They wanted to be famous. They wanted to take art into a public arena, and they kind of tried to use the media in an ironic way, and they mediated themselves. Jake and Dean Chapman, etc., being quite famous for it. But I think you guys were almost kind of running. You wanted to retain the outlaw spirit in a way and not be defined by it. Or did you feel there was a?
Well, it's interesting. I think it kind of goes into the sort of realm of graffiti in a way, where you really want to be famous, but you also don't want anyone to know who you are.
Yeah.
There's something about that mentality that I think that we grew up with,
Yeah.
and I don't think that we were opposed to it. I'm definitely interested in having kind of the widest possible audience be aware of my work, and especially people who aren't involved in the art world, because the art world can get so esoteric. But I think. I really think there was a moment where Dan and Dash and I were on the cover of New York Magazine, and they kind of coined us Warhol's children. And I thought, Warhol's children? They should be called like Warhol's grandchildren or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So
I think that was like, we didn't use it as specifically as they did. I think we played to it, but and I do think Ryan's kind of unique to this, but that like look at me, don't look at me. Was like a big, and that's like part of a conflict. It's part of like an intentional game also, but I don't think that we had a specific, like kind of engagement with it like the YBAs did. And then I do think that it like there was that like look at me, actually don't look at me, like forget about it.
Yeah.
Like not interested, like from different like from some of us at some different times, and like it got kind of confusing. It was never this thing that like I think I was manipulating all the time, and I think that's when like Ryan did something more interesting with it, where his work kind of turned at a similar time, like where it became like that optimistic thing, which really kind of defied it in like the greatest way, right? It was like actually no, it's just not that simple, and like I think me and Dash both like didn't know how to deal with it as gracefully, and like and kind of without knowing it, maybe more played into it, like kind of like so. But regardless, like we work close to Ryan and like seeing that happen, I think was like important. But I think it was like similar timing, and I think it's all kind of relevant.
I want to ask you about now, the last year or so, and the project that I'd love to talk to you about the exhibition you just did in London. Dan, tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, I actually I just made this show that I dedicated to Dash in London. It was a really kind of small, specific show. It was basically like an installation, and it was really all the work was really influenced by the relationship he and I had, and the relationship that I had to his work and to his kid, I think, and to her mother, and it's pretty special to be able to take my time, and kind of come to it with a different perspective and really, dedicate something to him. It's amazing because talking about how influential we all are on each other's work, the show, as intimate and kind of small scale as it is, I do think like it's there's a lot of development that like it illustrates in my work, and it's just nice to know that like he can still kind of influence my work. Really like specifically, if I don't have any images of it yet, but I can really show you, and you can really see it. And some of it is like, because I'm almost making things that I think would entertain him.
Yeah.
or that he'd enjoy. And other things are just things like, oh wow, it was great how he did that. Let me give it a shot. Like let me see what I can do with that. So that's like a pretty special thing to have happen. And
It's a love letter to Dash, the show.
yeah, it is.
And it's very intimate. It's how many paintings?
It's just one painting and a photograph and a sculpture.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an environment almost. You just kind of walk on it, through it. The whole thing's
It's
like
amazing that you can do things on that scale and then do things on completely different scales. Working with Gagosian obviously is a very different thing.
yeah. I even just like I was thinking about like the Dash almost inspiration, giving me the opportunity and like a really specific reason to kind of bring that back down and play. Just something to force me back into that range, because sometimes you could just like, you get carried away, right? And
There's
you
a
just end
tendency
up
now
growing.
in art
in
to
this-
scale everything up all the time, get
Yeah.
bigger and bigger, and you've gone to a bit quiet.
Yeah, and it's nice to know that like, the content really guides it's not the money or the public or the gallery that's guiding, the production or the scale, or, it's the content, and it's nice to get to see really the form change so drastically through the content, I really like that in my work, and, in art in general, to get to kind of see it happen, so, yeah.
I really miss living with you. Like we lived together for 10 years, and it's I guess we're at a point in our lives now where we can't see each other in the kitchen in the morning in our boxers. But there's something so nice about living with Dan for 10 years, just from the beginnings, which I remember even on Bleecker Street, like when I would come back to the apartment, I'd take somebody home, pick somebody up and take them home, and Dan would be sleeping on the beanbag, and I would be like, fuck. And then, I'd just take a sheet and throw it over him, and then just like, get it on the bed with somebody, and then, we'd wake up the next day, and then, just living on 7th Street in the East Village, it was so special because that's when our group really started to form, and there was, so many people in and out of the apartment, and just the exchange of ideas, and the things that you talk about. I guess when either when you're partying or when you're not, or or early in the morning or
Even
late
though
at
just the
night.
things you're talking about when you live together, like it's like with the media stuff, it's a double-edged sword, because at a certain point it was like, no, it's not about the lifestyle. Like, what about the work? But really, at the end of the day, like, and the work is really important for me. I would never want the work to be interpreted through any lifestyle, but it was about the lifestyle. My work looks like it does because I lived with him for 10 years. My work looks like it does because Dash and I spent, every day together till, 6 in the morning, and it developed like through that, not through like because we were talking about, abstraction or conceptual art or, appropriation or this. It was because like, we went and got Spanish food together, or hot dogs, or, we got a slice of pizza, or we went and stole a pair of jeans, or, and it really, but like, it drives me crazy if anybody else says this, because I'm like, no, but it's not art, but it really like, this really, developed. I was just telling Ryan on the subway ride over here, how I just, never had any teachers, my whole life who I had a nice relationship with, but I had one at college, which was really lucky because, he was a big influence on my work also. This guy, Dyke Blair, he's a good artist to look up, but, when we were graduating, he taught this seminar called the Professional Practices, and it was like, now that you're going out into art, well, this is, like the best I can give you. And he's really like a pretty pessimistic kind of guy, so he's like saying like, I can't give you anything, and it's not going to work out, but like if it does, here's a good way of, and it was like this list, and it was like, move to New York, make some friends, go out to the bar together, like be seen together, and like, do it like that. And I was like, like for 10 years I was like, what a stupid, like that's not, like that's not how it happens, like, or for 15, like until like a couple of years ago I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of just how it happened, like, Because for so long I'm just resistant to that kind of thing where I want it to be about the art, but it's about the personalities and about all the emotions that we're surrounded by, and I'm kind of getting a lot softer. Lately,
You're getting softer.
Yeah, I just feel like I like engage in like the emotional connection to my work, like to the spiritual, to to like art as like energy as opposed to like art as ideas.
Well, you've been through a hell of a lot,
Yeah.
and that's your own personal development, and Ryan's, your work's changed a hell of a lot as well. I mean, now you're going in the studio. That's been one of the biggest switches in your work, was going inside and doing kind of a way of doing portraiture of nudes in.
Yeah, I think that, just definitely, I'm always trying to evolve.
That's one of your more recent pieces, right? That's a
Yeah.
scratched ass.
Yeah, that's from
No,
someone
that's not
who.
now.
That's from someone who fell through a tree.
Oh, okay, that's
We were
really-
doing, these shots of. I'm really interested in the idea of falling. It's a big part of my work,
Mhm.
and I guess it kind of ties back to skateboarding because you're just constantly falling, and there's something so beautiful in that gesture. But I would never want to be an artist that just stuck with one thing. I really love taking risks and sort of, as hard as that is sometimes, and I want to do everything. I want to make, music videos, and I want to make movies, and I want to make photographs in the studio, and I want to make photographs outside. And I was just talking to Terry Gilliam last night about his opera,
Yeah.
and just about how great that was, and it's just how he, his insecurities with it, and then his pure happiness at, when it was actually together and he saw it for the first time. So I think that, I don't know, when I look at artists and the work just stays pretty stagnant, it kind of, it bothers me. So I definitely don't want to be an artist that isn't evolving. And working in the studio, I think, I was definitely scared to go into it because of the history of it. There's so many. It's just, what can you do against a white background that someone hasn't done before? And I was really trying so hard to try to come up with something new that I'm trying to find my voice. And then at a certain point, I realized that I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. I'm just trying to contribute to the history of the studio portraiture, and it was a really good feeling to realize that. And now I'm just trying to find my voice so that when someone looks at a photograph of mine in the studio, they can say that that's one of Ryan's photographs, and they can recognize it. And I think that that's something that's really important to me. That when someone opens up a magazine or a book, or is at basically looking at somewhere that they wouldn't know, my name wouldn't be there, so big.
Your
if it was
first
an
opening a
exhibition.
team gallery for that first body of studio work. I didn't go to the show, but I saw a YouTube clip of footage when the whole street was blocked. I mean, there was something like 400 people outside the gallery, 300 people inside the gallery.
There was 5,000 people that showed up.
5,000 people, and
Yeah,
then
we
there's-
got fined $20,000 by the New York City Police Department for they
How many people does the gallery
they
hold?
considered it a riot. I don't know how many gallery hold, but it was interesting because I said no, there couldn't have been that many people there, and what they did is that they did a helicopter shot over the streets, and there's I guess there's a way that they can tell by just gridding it out how many people there were there.
Dan, that must have been unbelievable to witness this gallery opening in New York and see 5,000 people turn out for it. I mean, I've never seen anything like that happen.
He's been doing that
What-
shit.
what
He's
happened?
been doing that forever. That's like his. It's like I don't even know. It's like part of his.
I don't know.
Part
I
of
mean,
his
I think
charm.
it's just I think there's something that's.
It will remain a myth.
Yeah, I mean,
Mythical
I don't
moment
know.
in the
I mean,
history of-
it's it's like I don't know, McGinley dust. It's like something. I don't know how he does it.
It was exciting though, I
It
think,
must have been really exciting.
there's something that's really nice about it, and just to know that there's that many people people that appreciate the work. There's the thing that I really loved about it, that there were so many people calling the gallery saying, is it invitation only, and how much does it cost to get in? And that was so great because it just means that there's people that aren't really interested in art, that don't know about going to galleries, that are coming to the show to see the work, that normally probably wouldn't look at art, because everyone knows that, you know, galleries are always open, and there's galleries don't charge money to go in, so it's just, you know, there's something so special about that, yeah. What's that?
Should we have questions from the audience? You
Sure,
up for that?
yeah, anybody. Feel free to ask us.
Let's talk about that idea of play and how it maybe fits into your work, you know,
I think
the relationship.
I mean, for my work specifically, it's for each of the shoots, finding the models and the locations and trying to figure out kind of what we're going to do. And then I just plan for everything to go wrong. About that moment that just is totally, completely unexpected.
I have a similar kind of relationship to it. I kind of came out of, like, I used to really try to control every last, detail, and my work was really a necessity. I started making more direct things, but, especially lately, yeah, for many years, but in the last 2 years, been thinking about it a lot, just, I don't really make for this moment of serendipity, or, just this magical kind of moment where, I literalize that, where I'm like, really like, I'm trying to be one step behind. There wouldn't be a point, and it probably wouldn't be like art, it'd be something else.